built this, I guess, around 2008 or 2010, I can't remember. And then we built the building next door, the Mango building. And so if you've been an FIU graduate and you haven't been on campus in 10 or 12 years, welcome to the campus. And we have a lot of great facilities, new facilities, parking decks, students, great programs, so a lot of good stuff over that time. And we also recognize the fact, and this is what the fun thing for me is, in being here in South Florida. My first time in South Florida was around 1980. I came down here, then I lived in Brazil and worked in Brazil for a while, and then went into banking. But one of my great experiences in Miami is sitting in the Miami airport on the way flying to Brazil, and I met something from BCCI Bank, and the person said, "Oh, you guys speak Portuguese, you speak Spanish, you need to come work for this bank." And thankfully I lost his business card and didn't end up in one of the true bank failures of all time. So hopefully none of you work for BCCI, but that was my introduction to Miami now almost over 40 years ago. My family's from Florida, Lakeland, Florida, that area. That's where my grandfather grew up. So I'm familiar with Florida, but I grew up mostly in Atlanta, so we had this animosity towards Florida, Georgia, Florida, as some of you may know. But I want to thank everybody for coming. Dr. Wertheim is the benefactor of our lecture series, and we appreciate his support. I know he's working on some other projects with the state university system now, some good stuff going on there supporting higher ed. FIU is doing great. The College of Business is highly ranked. Many of you know international business is number 2. Well, let me step back because I'm following into the trap of my marketing department, because they like to say that our international business undergraduate program is number 2 in the United States public. We're actually number 3 overall, right behind Harvard and right in front of Georgetown. So they like to say, okay, we're right behind South Carolina, and if you live in Florida, you know, you look down on South Carolina, but when you say we're right in there, and for our IMBA program, when you look at who's our group, who's our cohort, it is the Georgetowns, it is the top schools, it is the Harvards, it is those schools, and it's not just we're number 1 out of Miami-Dade County. It's like we're in a global context. But that's not only, we have, every one of our programs is highly ranked. We have great graduates. Many of you are graduates of our programs. And if you go anywhere in South Florida, and then I'm going to turn it over to Jenny, and you go into any room and you look at any leadership group, it's got FIU people in it. And probably the most unfortunate thing is they may not know all the other FIU people. But if you go into that room, if you go into that bank, if you go into that accounting firm, wherever you go and you walk in there and you start asking people, well, where did you go to school? Well, everyone has a FIU tie, because FIU has been central to the growth of South Florida. We've benefited from it, but we've also been a catalyst for it, because people come here because we have students, we have graduates who speak Spanish, who speak Portuguese, who speak every language, who are culturally aware, who are inclusive, who want the world to be a better place, and actually have a lot of great skills as well. And so we have great students. We place them all over. It's a fun place to be. And, you know, I'm going to turn it over to Jenny so she can introduce our speaker here. So, Jenny, here you go. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill, for the intro, and thank everybody for being here. As Bill alluded to earlier, the Wertheim Lecture Series is supported by the Wertheim family and was started in 1993. And today's kind of a special day because it's the first Wertheim lecture that we've had post-COVID. In person, I'll say in person. We did do a couple of virtual ones. So we want to thank you guys for being here and thank the Wertheim family for this. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Number 1, this is a recorded session. We put these on YouTube, so just for everybody to keep in mind, as well as just the format of today's program. So I'm going to introduce Mario. He'll come up. We've asked him to do a little bit of a TED Talk. And then I will be interviewing him, asking him a couple questions that were submitted by the audience in advance. So Without further ado, our amazing speaker today is Mario Trueba, who is the regional president of First Horizon, South Florida and New York. He's been an executive at First Horizon and its predecessor banks for 33 years. Born in Cuba, raised in Philadelphia, and has been a resident of South Florida for 50 years, so Miami native. Has a BA from Biscayne College, which now is St. Thomas University. He also is a trustee of their board. He has an MBA from our FIU, which we're very excited about. He's been married to his wife, Susanna, who's here with us today for 40 years. They have 2 children and 3 granddaughters, one a baby my age, my baby's age, so been talking a lot about that. As I mentioned, a trustee of St. Thomas University. He's been on the Orange Bowl committee. He serves on their board as well. And here at home at FIU, he's been a recipient of the Torch Awards, which, as you know, is the highest honor that we bestow on our alums. So thank you for being here with us. I will turn it over to you, and I will interview you shortly.
Okay, thank you. I'd ask you, I'm not going to use this, so if you have trouble hearing me, I'd ask you to move up. Even though I'm in a suit and tie, I was asked to wear a suit and tie, and I wear one to the office every day except Friday, but I'd like to be more casual than it might appear. Thank you for the overly generous and overly long introduction. I had Jenny not to make it a long one. And I appreciate the high school photo as well. So I've been asked, oh, there you go, that's actually my prom photo with this beautiful young lady. And that's our yearbook photo. So they wanted a couple photos from when they found out that my wife and I went to senior prom together. I'm sort of slow. You're going to be able to tell that when I speak. But when I found somebody with that kind of class, those kind of looks, and those kind of brains, I knew I was in. And that's just young lady. Some of you get a chance to spend. We get compliments all the time about our kids. And I said, well, do you know my wife? I said, not really. So get to know her, then you know why our kids are the way they are. So thank you for the photo. Yes, my eyes are closed, and yes, there were 7 other people in that tuxedo. And it was at the Sonesta we took off, for those of you who lived in Miami for a long time. Way before Andrew hit it. That was 1976. I think you were a 7th grader, but I was definitely a senior. Okay? To give you a sense. So, again, thank you, Jay. It's wonderful to be back at FIU. I've been involved in business school here for a long time. And when Bill mentioned that this was a parking lot, when my wife and I came to school here, she was an undergrad here after my day back then. It was not a 4-year school, right? Just a 2-year school plus graduate. And I came here for graduate school. We would park in the runways from the old Miami Airport. Okay? And you had 4 buildings. And the first one being PC, Primera Casa. To give you a sense, right? That some of you go back almost that far, but not that quite. It was amazing. The average age of students when I was a graduate student was 27, to give you a sense. I need to use it? Why? Okay, so I'm stuck using the microphone. It's all right. Thanks, Amanda. No problem. We told Amanda beforehand, tell me if I need to use it. She told me. All right, no problem. So I've been asked to talk a little bit about my FIU journey. As you guys know, I run a bank for a living, and my career in banking has been tied in many respects to M&A, and I'm sure I'll get some questions about that later on. And the other side, beside the regional presidency, in case you have questions about it also, the sports entertainment division of the bank also reports to me. So that's an interesting element of we have a subspecialty in that a lot of places don't have, and that's been successful for us as well. Being a sports fan and a music fan, that's not why it reports to me, but it's logical, and I can add a little value at times about it. But around my FIU journey, when I graduated undergrad, I was a liberal arts major. I was a psychology major and a secondary education major. Okay? And I was going to graduate early with my psychology degree, and Susanna had changed majors because she needed somebody in the family to make some money. As a psych major, I was going to make none. So she shifted to computer science, right? We weren't married quite yet. And I was going to graduate a little earlier than her. So I said, look, if I stayed till my regular time, I worked my electives so I could get a teaching degree. So I figured I could have something to fall back on. And I actually taught my senior year undergrad. I spent the whole January to May teaching at St. Brendan's High School. I taught 5 sections of psychology and sociology because you had to teach something you knew about, and I was a psych major. So it's pretty easy. And I got my teaching degree never intending to teach, just having it as a backup. I tell that to the students in the room. That backup never hurts, right? And I also was thrilled that I was lucky enough to be a liberal arts major as an undergrad because it taught me how to write. It taught me how to research way before you had Wikipedia and Google that you can't believe. I learned how to research properly, and I learned to do this. When you teach in high school, and the students are almost your age, because my students were almost all girls, 17 and 18, and I was 20. We used to run into them, and my wife, at the time, girlfriend, would say, "Who's that woman that just said hello to?" That's one of my students. She didn't believe me, okay? You can't have a bad day when you teach high school students. Ask Professor Corbell when he teaches college students. They know when you're off, and they know when you don't know what you're talking about. So you get nervous the first couple times, but after that, you better have your stuff together, right? So you learn how to public speak. So to me, it's easy. To me, it's the reason I don't need a microphone except for the recording, right? So when I graduated, I was admitted to clinical psychology program at the University of Miami. It was I had been a good student, pretty good student as an undergrad, and but my heart really wasn't in it. I wasn't sure I wanted to be a clinical psychologist, and there were very few spots, and I didn't think it was fair for me to take that spot. So I didn't take it, and the folks at Biscayne College were really upset. They liked the prestige of one of their students going to this program. And I started to work full-time, and I thought, you know what, let me dip my toe in the water. So I started at FIU in the graduate program of community psychology. And I was about halfway through, more than halfway through, one class beyond halfway, okay? And every so often I would check the college placement office. And I came to the college placement office one day, and I noticed that they were interviewing for what I thought would be sort of a very interesting job. And it was being part of the first joint training program in a big bank merger at the time. Today it'd be a couple babies getting together. But back then, it was, if I can use this terminology being recorded, it was a BFD, okay? And so I went up to the college placement office and said, "Hi, I'd like to interview for this job." And it was Flagship Bank and Sun Bank merging. And you had to interview. A bunch of you are nodding your heads knowingly. That's usually not the 20-year-olds that are nodding their heads, right? And they said, "Well, were you a finance major as an undergrad?" Remember, I had no equity at FIU. I was going to school here, but I had no equity here. "Were you a finance major as an undergrad?" "No." "Are you an MBA candidate?" "No." "Well, then you can't interview." I said, "Okay, let me ask you a question. If I became an MBA candidate, could I interview?" They said, "Yes." I said, "I'll be back." So I went and found the graduate school business counselor. I said, "Hi, I need to speak to the graduate school business counselor." I come inside, I meet with this lady. She's dressed in a dashiki, okay, African garb. I don't know a lot about Africa. I didn't know a lot about Africa then. This lady, super impressive lady, okay, and she and FIU are really the reasons I am where I am today. They facilitated big time. I needed help. Her name was Linda Rahim, and we stayed in touch for a long time after that. I said, "How can I help you, Mario?" And I told her the story that I just told you guys. I'd like to interview for a job upstairs, but in order to interview for the job, frankly, I think banking is going to be a boring business, but the merger of these two banks, it's going to be super interesting. I'd like to be on the ground floor of it. Says, "So you're telling me that you want to be an MBA candidate because you want to interview for a job upstairs?" "Yes." "That's the only reason?" "Yes. But I promise, if you will allow me, that I'll finish my MBA if I start." I said, "But I'm not done." I said, "I want you to transfer 3 of my psychology graduate credits, 3 classes, 9 credits to the MBA program." She starts laughing. Says, "But they're psychology credits." "Come on," I said, "there's 3 classes in statistics. Some of that has to work in the MBA program. I don't want to start again." I said, "Mario, why would I do that? Why should I do this?" I said, "Because if you don't help me, you're going to lose me. And I don't think you want to do that. And I don't think that's good for FIU." And she went in the back room, like car salesmen probably do, right? Probably laughed her butt off and came back and said, all right, Mario, we'll do it. And I said, and you'll transfer the nine credits, the 3 classes also? She says, yes, we will. I said, am I technically an MBA candidate? She said, yes. I said, I need a letter. I said, okay, give me a couple seconds. She did a letter. I went up, I was clear with her that I thought if I interviewed for the job, we were talking about interviews before, right? Okay, I wasn't interviewing around, so in this case I had to nail the first interview, right? And I felt confident that if I interviewed, I'd get the job. And I said, I need a letter. I went back up the next day to placement. Hi, I'd like to interview. Oh, weren't you here yesterday? Yes, I was, but I wasn't an MBA candidate yesterday. Today I am. By the way, when she allowed me to become an MBA candidate, she said, which is the right thing for her to do, she says, but you need to take financial accounting, the Weeder course, right? I knew what financial accounting was. I didn't want any part of financial accounting, right? But I knew I'd have to take it in order to make sure I was serious. Leandro Nunez, that was the name of the professor of the financial accounting class. And I said, oh, there you go. Some of you remember. I said, for sure, I'll take it. And I understand it's a Weeder course. You need to make sure I'm serious, but I want the letter. Gave me the letter. I went upstairs. They set up the interviews. I interviewed on both sides, flagship side, Sun side, and I got the job. Okay? Got the job. Then, financial accounting. There were 63, 65 people in that first class. And he looked around and said, look around, because only about 20 of you are going to be here for the final exam. And I'm thinking, oh, geez, I got the job already, right? And I was one of the 20. And I had rarely been in a class in college or in graduate school at that point where I said to myself, just give me the credits and let me get out of here. I just want to pass. Financial accounting was, I just want to pass. There were only 2 classes when I was at FIU that I just needed to pass. One was financial accounting, and the other one drove my wife crazy because we were married by then. And that was basic for business computers. I couldn't get it, okay? But I passed them both. I did really well in the others, but I didn't do really well in those 2. But I passed, okay? There were a couple, I think, morals in that story, and I think that's why Jennifer wanted me to tell you the story. One, I couldn't have done it myself. I needed somebody to believe in me. Somebody that didn't know me, okay? And that was Mrs. Rahim, okay? And whenever I would show up in the paper, or whenever I got promoted, or whenever I was in, she'd send me a note. I knew I bet on the right guy. It was great. It was a great, but I could not have done it without her. So when I was asked to get involved in FIU, it really had to do with a lot of trying to give back to the place that had helped me through her, okay? She was great. I couldn't have done it without her. And I had to have the confidence in myself that I sort of knew what I wanted. Remember, this is the same guy that studied something that he ended up wanting not to do, okay? But the foundation I got as an undergrad helped me. When I was in a training program, everybody knew the numbers, but nobody could do this. That was a big difference. So those of you who are studying business, and even those of you who are studying accounting that I met, in your electives, do things that challenges you. Do things that challenge you. Get outside of your comfort zone. Some of you are going to go into consulting, and it's never in the numbers. As a guy, and I got a bunch of my colleagues here who are nice enough to come, the numbers lie for a living. You got to get behind the numbers. You got to understand what's there. You got to understand the people behind the numbers. When you stretch your comfort zone, you learn those types of things. Professor Corbell could teach you that, okay? You got to have I was telling him before that I didn't have the foundation of banking when I got the job. I learned it through graduate school and through on the job. And you don't have to know exactly what you want to do, but once you figure it out, you got to zero in on it. And you need to have support, right? Whether it's the family. In my case, it was a beautiful young lady, right? We didn't have any kids then. I went to graduate school before we had kids, thank God. Because I'm not sure I would have finished graduate school. Now, I'll tell you something else. You guys Bill was talking about this beautiful building and the mango building, and there's probably a papaya building too, and all sorts of different tropical fruit buildings, right? When I went to graduate school here, I saw Jerry Harr before. Some of you probably know Jerry Harr. He was my graduate school professor. taught me international business. He was about this size, as you guys know, right? So it's really easy to have that kind of professor. You didn't have to sit in the front, right? You're like, oh my gosh, where does this guy go, right? There was only 4 of us in that class. 4. My graduate classes were at Riviera, FIU graduate classes, Riviera Junior High School. The desks were a little tight, okay? BCC Davie on Saturday mornings, and we lived, as you remember, right here close to this campus. I had 2 classes on the main campus when I was in graduate school here. Dos, okay? The North Campus, because back then FIU had built the North Campus. I'll be careful what I say, because I generally only curse in Spanish, but let's just say it wasn't immediately successful. And they were trying to reposition certain things out there, so they repositioned part of the MBA program out there. So that's why I had Jerry Harr was at the North Campus, and another class there. What else? Downtown. My office was, since I got the job, was at 777 Brickell. And man, I was like a road warrior. I was constantly driving around the city to take graduate classes, only twice here. I remember I had operations management at Riviera Junior High. It was one of the classes I had there. People kid me about my memory. I know it's a good memory. It comes in handy. When you're a banker and you lend money, it's a good skill to have a good memory. Okay? My colleagues know that. Okay? And the problem is they rely on my memory too often. They don't write it down. Somebody, you remember this, right? I say, oh my gosh, now they're taxing my memory. But so I saw, through my experiences here, I've seen what FIU has become. It's those people that were here in the 70s, and I wasn't, okay? But those folks that were here in the 80s, I mean, it's amazing what this university has become and what an asset it is to South Florida and to Florida overall. And it continues to shine. We need to get its football team to get a little better, just like we need the University of Miami to get a little better in football, right? We need and FAU for that matter. Tough year for all 3. But it's just gone crazy in many ways academically, and we'll go crazy positively athletically, I'm sure, soon. But that's pretty much my story. I hope I covered, Jenny, what you wanted me to cover in terms of my FIU journey. It's been a very successful journey, and I'm sure in your interviews you'll ask me a few questions about banking. If not, hopefully you guys will ask me some questions. Thank you very much.
Let's see. Hello? Well, maybe we can pass it back and forth. I don't know.
No, I'm just, without glasses, I could be turning it off by accident. Thank you very much.
Mario, that was awesome. I do love that story so much. And one of the reasons why I love this lecture as well is because the students at FIU get to see someone who was in their seat at one point. And I think a lot of you can probably attest to the fact that you're going through finals right now. It's finals week. Maybe you're graduating in a couple of weeks. And you're trying to get that job right after graduation, but you don't necessarily think that you're going to become the head of a bank or that you're going to go on to do all of these incredible things. So thank you for sharing that story. I want to first take you back a little bit and talk about what was growing up like for you. I know you were born in Cuba. A lot of our students are first generation in their family to go to college. So can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. First generation college as well. And obviously I have no memory of Cuba. We got out when I was 2 through Spain. I ended up in downtown Philadelphia, Pennsylvania in a rented row house for 10 years. As a kid, I loved it. My parents they didn't quite love it. I have a brother who's 2 years younger than me and a sister who's actually an electrical engineering graduate from here, who's 10 years younger than me. And when she was born, they figured, oh man, we need to go south. Right, it's a little too cold. I grew up in downtown Philadelphia. To give you an idea, the name of my elementary school before they named it after a benefactor was City Center Elementary. Was that downtown? And we rented 5 floors in a life insurance building, and that's where elementary was. And my gym, PE, was in something that we don't have in Miami, a basement. That's where PE was, right? And then I went to 7th grade on the Penn campus at a Catholic school, St. Leonard's Academy, the Holy Child. And then they decided to come south, and we got here in August of 71. And they enrolled me. It was too late for Belen. They wanted me to go to Belen at a school named Loyola, which is right here, was right here. The real estate became too valuable. I was telling some folks before, and the backside of Loyola was the entrance to is now the entrance to FIU, 16th. They culverted the canal eventually, sold the real estate for a tremendous amount of money. It's all homes there now, and I stayed here for undergrad. I stayed here for graduate school. I met this beautiful woman, and I didn't want to go anywhere else. I almost went away to school to play basketball, but my heart got in the way, and it took me a long time to appreciate South Florida. It took me about 6 months. I remember moving here in August. I wasn't a Dolphin fan. And those of you who were here, 7172, imagine everything was Dolphins. The white handkerchiefs, it was disgusting. As somebody who did not grow up as a Dolphin fan. I grew up an Oakland Raiders fan, by the way, because I like offense. And I did not grow up an Eagles fan. And when I got here, I was like, the University of Miami was so bad at football, they would play Friday nights because they couldn't outdraw the high schools on Saturday. Okay? So I was like, geez, I came from Philadelphia. There's all these sports all over the place. And here, that was August. Right, it's crappy. September's not much better. In February, I remember having a conversation with myself saying, you're never leaving here. You dumb. How did it take you 6 months to get this? This place is the best. And I've never left. I've had professional opportunities to go a lot of different places. And we'll run through the professional journey later, I guess. But a bunch of different places, Europe and up north. And I never got serious about any of them. And I always had two excuses. Number one, the quality of life I have in South Florida can't be replicated. And number two, who are you going to get to replace me? I don't trust my colleagues to somebody I don't know. So I've always was able to use both of those to stay here.
I love that. We're going to have to talk offline because my mom actually went to Loyola. I know it was a very small school, so you guys probably know each other.
Oh, yeah, probably. She probably remembers this stuff.
Yeah, probably.
Well, you may want to take that down, by the way. Susanna's probably turning different colors here.
She's mortified.
All right.
It's a beautiful dress, by the way, even still. So talking about your career, did you aspire to a leadership position? Did you automatically know I want to be a top guy in this field?
Yeah, when I interviewed, I remember telling the flagship guy, I said, look, I'm trying to figure out what I'm going to do in my life. And I really like this job, but I want you to tell me the truth. I mean, guys, this is a long time ago, okay? 1983. I said, if you're going to tell me I won't be a senior vice president in 10 years and I won't make $75,000, tell me now.
75,000 in what year?
Right. That was 1983. So
good.
it would be, my starting salary at the bank was $17,000. The salary I gave up to go to the bank training program was $25,000. I was doing fine. I just was not very career line oriented. That's why I wanted to interview, because I want to get more career line oriented. And what was then Sun Bank is before Trust Company. It became SunTrust 18 months later. So my career in banking has had a lot of M&A to it, because I started the day the flagship Sun merger went through, and that was not a pretty merger. I was not on either side. I was just ducking to make sure I wasn't in the way of the bullets, right? All the trainees, we were all ducking. We didn't realize how bumpy it could be. It was a big deal then, like as I mentioned earlier with the acronym. And I learned a tremendous amount there, mostly credit, because that's what management training really was credit. And I had management experience outside of banking beforehand. Actually, you don't know this, Jenny, but I ran a student financial aid department at 2 proprietary colleges when I graduated. That's what I was doing when I was going to graduate school here in psychology in the evenings. And that's why I was earning what I was earning. So I know a lot about student financial aid at a bunch of different levels. In fact, from many years ago. And so I had management experience already. And when I decided to leave SunTrust 6 years after I started, the key reason I left was because I thought there was a more entrepreneurial way of doing things. I liked the entrepreneurial aspects. And I wanted management experience in banking, and I wanted to learn much more about real estate. Because I thought if you're going to run a bank in Florida, you need to know commercial real estate. I knew a lot about commercial and corporate lending because that's what I did. I thought I knew a lot. But I didn't know enough about commercial real estate. And I needed to be able to manage folks in banking. And so, yes, because I aspired to be the CEO of the bank.
Awesome. So I kind of want to know what, if you had to put a finger on the top attribute, I think that led to that path of leadership. And you have a quote up here in your 1971 high school yearbook, so I have a feeling I know where this is going to go. But if you had to say the one thing that attributed, about you that attributed to your success, what would that thing be?
Okay, so the quote there is, be more concerned about your character than your reputation, because your reputation is what others think you are, while your character is what you really are. And I really felt highly about that, and I've tried to live my life that way. But I know it sounds sort of trite and inconsequential, but I think most people that know me, you can ask my colleagues offline, they would tell you that I'm a gentleman. Offline. And that's how I live my life, to be a gentleman. And that's how I've raised, together with Susanna, our son and our daughter. And usually when things would come up in life, because things come up as kids, I'm sure my son, if he'd be here, he'd be rolling his eyes, because he'd ask me for advice. And I said, well, let me ask you a question. Is that what a gentleman would do? If that's what a gentleman would do, do it. If you're not sure, cuidado. Okay? Be careful. But if that's what and same thing with my daughter. Is that the way a lady would do it? If that's what she'd do, ask yourself that. Feel comfortable doing it. If not, no. Okay? So I'm no smarter than anyone else. Frankly, I think I'm of average intelligence. But I got my work ethic from my dad, and I got my essential decency from him as well. And that's what I try to do, work hard. And I've been fortunate. These guys are good examples, these four, of surrounding myself with my wife and I were talking about on the way over, right, son? I work with high-quality people that also happen to be good bankers. If they were just good bankers and crappy people, I don't want any part of them. And they wouldn't be part of me if I was a crappy person. So I've been very fortunate in my whole career. I've worked with high-quality people. And that's why I'm successful, because I might be the quote-unquote coach, but the assistant coaches are fantastic.
I love it. It's kind of a good segue. I'm going to skip around to some of the questions that the folks asked. But for the students in the room, along those lines, aside from the hard skills, what are you looking for when you're hiring in your area, now that you're talking about surrounding yourself with great people?
Yeah, that's a good question, and particularly for the students. So the hard skills, certainly you want them to be there, but I think we can develop the hard skills. A lot depends on what role somebody's interviewing for. So if somebody's going to interview for an IT or an accounting or a operational job, we're going to look for certain things, right? Whereas if they're going to be a client-facing, it's a little different. If it's client-facing, people need to feel comfortable extending themselves out to help develop business for the bank. If they're at a reception and they're quote-unquote hugging the last lamb chop, chances are that person's not going to work well in that role. Okay? So you want to be comfortable in their own skin, and that takes time to develop. We talked about practicing interviewing before. You have to, in a social setting, it takes practice, but you got to want to get better at things. We want people that continually want to improve and want to learn. If historically in the bank, if we hired someone who was 22 or 23, by the time they got to 30, they thought the grass was greener somewhere, and we were worried we'd lose them. And sort of like what I did, okay? And so part of our job is to make sure that we prove to folks that the grass isn't greener. When you've only had one job, you assume the grass is greener. So we have to constantly go out of our way to explain to folks. I used to tell people, look, we want to hire somebody who's worked at 2 places before, because once they've worked at 2 places, and Professor Corbell knows this, by the time they get to our place, they're like, oh, wait a minute, this is a little different. Different in a good way, right? So we've done a much better job of taking younger folks and teaching them sort of the way we go about doing things. I think our culture is really about our people. We've gone through a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the bank, and as we tell people regularly, because I get kidded all, you guys were kidding me before about the M&A that we've done, and my typical line, and it's 100% true, is, you know what, the name on the front of the jersey has changed a bunch of times, but the name on the back of the jersey never changed, okay? And if you're working with me, you got a First Horizon business card, you have Mario Trueba's business card. So when we hire people, I want to make sure it's somebody that we can have total confidence in. It starts with being honorable and decent. We're in a trust business. You have to be able to trust a bank. Doesn't matter if you go into a branch, if you do it digitally, if you borrow money, if you're just a depositor, if you're a wealth management client, you need to feel that we have your best interests at heart. So we need to find folks that want to serve clients, whether they're the internal client or the external client. That's a lot more than you want to know, but that's the kind of stuff we look for. And a lot of it's intangible, as you're describing. And so it takes a lot of conversation to get to know people.
Yeah, I think the soft skills are increasingly becoming more and more important, I think, among the corporate partners that we work with. And as you said, the hard skills are teachable, the soft skills sometimes not so much. But you alluded to this as well. I mean, I know that you have bought and sold a few banks in your time. How do you keep your people motivated during those times? How do you keep them excited and excited to come to work, essentially?
Well, the four folks in the room, you're probably better off asking them. They've all worked with me for a long period of time. They don't go back to the original bank, none of them. But I've bought, I've sold, I've been bought, and I've been sold. Okay, across a lot of different fronts. I've been very, very involved in leading it 5 times. I was somewhat involved the 6th time. We're being sold now, and I'm not involved in that. Okay, so probably the more challenging time is now. We're pending being sold to TD, and we're pending regulatory approval. So we would have hoped it would be December. These things take a while. We're hoping it's January so we can close either in January or in February. We're both being very, very careful to make sure we run independent banks, because the last thing you want to do is get on the regulator's bad side. And we've been extremely careful to do that. We are in the largest overlap market of TD. Okay? Most of the other places we operate, there's not much of an overlap. But in South Florida, other than the Keys, it is. They have nothing in the Keys. Now, the good part, the very good part, is that TD wants to be much bigger in South Florida than they currently are. They want to have a much better commercial banking business. We bring them that. They want to have a much better private banking and wealth management business. We also bring them that. They bring us certainty, a great balance sheet, quality people, and a great retail operation. So I think it's going to be a good marriage, but we've got to make it a good marriage. I've been able to do it a bunch of times in the past. We sold a privately held bank that I joined in 98. I'm sorry, we sold it in 90. So I joined in 89. We sold it in 98. A privately held bank, we sold to Mellon Financial Corporation, which was a bastion of the, I mean, think about selling a bank to Mellon. I mean, come on, the history, un cubano, I mean, please. I mean, think about that. The owners of the bank at the time, 2 gentlemen owned 35% apiece, and I led the sale with them. And they're like, wow, can you believe we're going to sell this to Mellon? I mean, it was amazing, right? And that was a very nice run for a long time. And then Bank of New York did a merger of equals with Mellon about 8 years later. And Bank of New York had sold all its commercial banking. Mellon had sold all its commercial banking except the bank in LA. They bought 2 weeks after us and us. And 45 days after, that's not true. 95 days after the combination, they came to me and they said, Mario, we're the wrong owners for you. And I said, I know. And they asked me to go to New York, meet with Credit Suisse. Credit Suisse was their investment advisor, to help them market the bank to buyers in the middle of the financial crisis. In the middle of financial crisis. And they had already, 6 weeks beforehand, started selling the bank they had bought 2 weeks after us in Los Angeles. That unfortunately, management-wise, had been a mess. They ended up selling that to U.S. Bank. In our case, they allowed us, because we had kept all our management in place, they allowed us to potentially try to buy the bank. So that, to me, people call that my second MBA. My clients and colleagues that have known me a long time say, Mario, when you were representing Bank of New York Mellon in trying to divest of a bank called Mellon United at the time, you were trying to buy the bank yourself with investors, but you were also trying to sell it to any legitimate third party. I said, yes. We would have meetings with potential buyers, and there would always be me and a gentleman from Mellon who I called my babysitter. He hated that terminology. Wonderful guy. But he hated that terminology because that meant he was there because he didn't want me to leave. They didn't want me to leave. So I had a babysitter. And he would be there representing the seller. I was a sellee. The potential buyers were sitting where you guys are sitting. And I would explain to the potential buyers, look, this is what's going on. This is why they're selling. We're trying to buy as management, but we're also trying to sell because we need to get out. They're motivated sellers. The key is that we get out. And every single potential buyer would look to the gentleman who's sitting to my right, and they'd say, is he for real? And he would say, just listen to Mario. He's telling you the truth. He was in every first meeting with any potential buyers, but he never went to the second meetings because they knew that it gets back to my being a gentleman and I think my essential decency, that I wasn't going to take anybody for a ride. We're going to tell them the truth. We actually, a lot of people don't know this, we actually signed a contract to buy the bank as management and collected 10% deposits. And we couldn't deliver. The financial crisis kept getting worse. We started getting worried. Our investors were definitely worried. And we gave those 10% deposits back. And then we had to go to our employer. I had to go to our employer and say, we can't perform. That was not a lot of fun. Okay? That was not a lot of fun in the middle of a financial crisis. And a couple things happened after that were bumpy. And about 3 months later, they called me on the phone and said, hey, Mario, we're trying to figure out what to do with the bank. We can wait a couple of years till things get better, and then we can market it, or we can have you start potentially marketing the bank for us again. And I told them, think about your decision carefully. And they knew what that meant. They called me a week later and said, would you please help us market the bank again? I said, absolutely. So that was our second round. We were no longer potential buyers. We went with a bunch of other potential buyers, and that's when I met with Banco Sabadell from Barcelona. They had bought a bank in Miami before the financial crisis that ended up costing them more money to fix it. Juan knows the story because Juan was there. More money to fix it than when they actually paid for it. Because the financial crisis, guys, it took no prisoners. It seems like it's way, way in the rearview mirror. The students in this room were 5 or 6 at the time, maybe. But it hurt. Okay? I wanted Sabadell to get a package a year beforehand. And I told them that when I met with them. Their first comment was, Credit Suisse tried to get with me, Mario, but we weren't ready. We were dealing with our other situation. And I liked them a ton. I met with 6 or 7 others that January and February. But we made a deal. Bank of New York Mellon, to their credit, they were a very motivated seller. And we were able to pull it off. And that's when we became Sabadell United. And then when Spain became messy, which got messy quite a bit after the financial crisis, they needed to sell. That's how we became Iberia. Then Iberia did a merger of equals with First Horizon. 2.5 years later, that's why we're First Horizon. Going back to Sabadell United days, I was the CEO. We had our own charter. Many of you are studying banking. We had our own charter. We were OCC regulated. We didn't collapse our charter until we sold to Iberia. That's when I ceased being the CEO and I became the regional president. Probably more than you want to know, and you probably caught half of that, but now I disclose totally.
I love it. So this sounds like a lot of potentially risky business. What would you say is the most important risk you took in that career, and why?
I don't, I get asked that question a lot, and maybe the biggest risk was I never looked for the exits. I never had a plan B. I suggested all of you should have a plan B, but I never had a plan B. And the main reason I had a plan B was because I'm responsible for everybody that works for me, okay? Everybody. And making sure there's a soft landing for those people are important to me. When we did the Iberia deal from Sabadell into Iberia, we had an R and a D list. R was retained, D was displaced. Okay, there was some overlap, so some people were going to get displaced. And we worked tirelessly, and Iberia was very good about it, looking for open jobs, that if someone was in a position, that position they already had somebody for, that we could slot that person into an R job. We spent a lot of time around that. I take the position that nobody should care as much about my colleagues than me. And that's how it needs to be. I've been at the bank for 33 years. And we've got 20 people that have been there longer than me. Remember how the name on the front of jerseys changed a few times? 20 people longer than me. And we've got 65 that have been there 20 years or more. Not these guys, okay? And this is the Dade County Brain Trust right here, other than one gentleman who's at another community meeting today, okay? So the guys that run our biggest market are here, okay? They've all been with us a long time, but not those 20 years. We have a lot of institutional memory. And when you have people who have been with you that long, you feel a certain responsibility to them. And that's the largest reason, and really the only reason, I've never had a plan B. I don't have a plan B today. I don't need a plan B. I'm very comfortable with what I'm doing and what I'm going to do. So,
I love that. I love that. I'm going to ask you one more personal question, and then we'll get to probably what's on everybody's mind, which is the current economy and what's happening in the banking industry. And but I want to know. I was a psychology major too, so as you know, so I tend to ask kind of deep questions. But when was one of your most spectacular failures, and what did you learn from that? I know nobody really likes that question.
Well, my most spectacular failure, I think, was I don't really think about it professionally because I can't point to a spectacular failure professionally. You said, what disappointed you the most that you could have had some control over? When I lost the district championship my senior year in high school in basketball, and cried my eyes out. Absolutely cried. I mean, it was terrible. It was terrible. And why? Because I knew unless I played in college, and I probably wasn't good enough, I'd never play again. And I'll tell you guys a quick story you guys would appreciate. I was crying my eyes out. And people came by and said, stop crying, stop crying. And somebody came by and said, cry all you want. And that was her. It was.
We love Susanna.
So that was my most spectacular. Professionally, I can't focus on it. Even when we tried to buy the bank, we can say that was a failure because obviously we failed, right? We couldn't perform. But I think we did the right thing by giving investors back their money. Because those of you that were adults at that time, you remember what 07 and 08 were like in the United States. And if you remember, we were talking about before, Florida, we tend to hit recessions later, but we tend to go whoop, really deep. Now we pop out much steeper, but we go in late and we go in big. We come out quicker because we get money from all sorts of places. Up north, up south, up east, and up west, right? We have that benefit of Florida. We'll talk about Florida later. I'm a big Florida fan, okay? So I would say professionally, that was the toughest part because as owners, we would have controlled our own future. And we had agreed on a contract. We agreed on a price. We had the money raised. We had 10% deposit up, 10% in deposits up, including my money and our original founder's money. who was putting in a significant amount of money to his credit, and he's still alive, thankfully. And the number 3 guy in the bank as well was an investor, and who's retired about 6 years ago. And there was too many things around us we couldn't control, largely the state of the economy, and we backed out. So I would say probably that's, because now we went down in flames there, right? I mean, we had to go back and tell our employer, I'm sorry, I'm trying to buy this, and I can't. That was not a lot of fun. But I think they realized the times we were in, and they were ladies and gentlemen enough to say, hey, these guys gave it a good faith effort, and they just couldn't make it happen. We've been lucky to have people complain about their parent companies a lot, and in banking they complain about regulators a lot. I've been in the industry for almost 40 years. At this bank for 33 years. I don't have complaints about the regulators, and I don't have complaints about my parent companies. I've been a parent company. I've been a child, right? I've seen both sides. And I've been largely regulated by the OCC, Office of Controller of Currency, and a little bit by the Fed, but mostly OCC. We're going to go back to OCC when we do the TD deal. We're Fed today, Fed of St. Louis. We were Fed of Atlanta for a short while when it was Iberia. And I've always been very, very, I mean, to give you an idea, the gentleman who ran the OCC down here, when he retired, we put him on the board at the bank. And he came on the board, which told you that he had comfort with us and we had comfort with him. Don't confuse regulations with regulators. Some banks do, and they get in trouble. I don't. We've always been treated, I think, in a very upfront and professional way. And my experience with the OCC and with the Fed has always, without exception, been very professional.
Are you saying that because this is recorded? No, I'm just
No,
kidding.
people, every time I say that,
I'm
people start
joking.
saying, oh, there goes Pollyanna again, Pollyanna Trueba, the whole show, right? Look, we bought a bank from the FDIC in 2011. Okay? We bought a bank in 2018 that came out of the regulatory penalty box. So we've seen those sides. And we were treated properly. We would not have been able to buy the bank we bought in 2011 from the FDIC because technically it was more than half my size. So we needed, really on steroids, it was more than half my size, but it technically was. And we had to go get permission. And I'll tell you a quick story of what happened. So we were at Sabadell United at the time, and we wanted to buy a bank named Lydian. It was based on the island of Palm Beach County. Okay? And we had been invited to about 35 or 40 public auctions of banks by the regulators. We were a quality bank, we're quality people, we got invited. We bid on none of them because they were all sort of financial deals and they were based in other places. And so we went to our regulator, the OCC, and said, hey guys, we'd like your permission to bid on Lydian. I said, okay, we'll call the Fed. So they call the FDIC, and the FDIC tells them, we've invited those guys 40 times, and they haven't bid yet. And the OCC calls and said, guys, you're making us look bad. They said they've invited you forever, and you don't. I said, yeah, because we don't want to go to Iowa, and we don't want to go to Nebraska, and we don't want to go to Texas. This bank is strategic. It's in our market, and they've got a wealth management business that's been protected. And I used to run the wealth management business at Mellon and Bank of New York Mellon beside the bank. I wanted to get back in that business. Buying them 11 years ago, August of 11, helped me get back in that business. But it couldn't have happened without us having a good relationship with the regulators. And the two senior managers from that company, now, the gentleman was the other who went to FIU, Orlando Roche, we got from that acquisition. And the young lady named Deb Vasilopoulos that runs Broward and Palm Beach for me also came from that acquisition. Two high-quality people, they're also high-quality bankers. And we couldn't have made that happen if our regulators didn't believe in us. And they didn't have to, but they realized that, hey, we weren't just... And I'll tell you a quick story. You guys have probably seen it on TV. When a bank gets intervened, it's like a movie. You can't make this stuff up. They go in a Friday night, they pull the charter, and you take over. So I meet with the FDIC on Thursday and on Friday, the Friday that we go in. We bid on Monday. We found out Tuesday we won the bank, and we go in on Friday. They check into a hotel under an assumed name in Palm Beach County. Go into a room bigger than this, round tables. There's like 12 people. They all stand up and introduce themselves to me. I have to tell them about our bank. Next day, they say, Mario, bring ID, because you won't be able to get in here without ID. I said, well, I'm here today. You know who I am? Bring ID. Okay. We go the next day, the Friday that we're going to go in, and the room is mobbed. Back on Thursday, it was one person at each table. Friday, it's mobbed. They all get up and introduce again. They say, Mario, would you explain the bank again to people? Yes. And it was wonderful to hear how they would handle it. Because when they go in, they might keep the people there all weekend. They order pizza in, the whole show. And they explain to people, so look, because it's emotional for people. They just took over the bank. They don't know what's happening. People know it's bumpy, but they don't know what's happening. And it's like, look, if you're interviewing somebody and they need to have their moment, if they start crying, let them have. We got to get certain information, but we don't have to get it right then. This is the two head FDIC guys telling their people. Right? To explain the whole thing, they explain the whole thing to us, and they say, Mario, you're going to be at the headquarters with a couple of people, right? I said, yeah, absolutely. I said, when do we go in? They said, you follow the cops. I said, wait a second. We're buying a bank. You just don't say hello by following the cops in. He says, it's not up to you, Mario. This gets messy. We've had issues before. You follow the cops. So we go up to the island of Palm Beach, imagine, right? We go up to the island of Palm Beach, and it's in August, so you can shoot a cannon and not hit anybody, right? Because after all, it's Palm Beach Island in August. We go up to their parking lot. We park in the back, sort of hidden as you can be, and two government-looking vans come in, where the FDIC guys are, and two Florida State Troopers come out with the Panama hats and the glasses and tall guys. And he had said, wait 5 minutes after the cops, and you go in. That's what we did. Waited for the cops. Went to the boardroom. They said, this is your new owner. And Deb, who you guys all know, who's the lady who runs Brown and Palm Beach for us, it comes to see me. She goes, thank God it's you, Mario. They didn't know who it was going to be. They knew it was going to be down that day, but they didn't know who it was going to be. And it was a blind bid. And that stuff all goes down blind bid, and you find out Tuesday, that Friday, it's yours. And they give you a receipt. I mean, this is the America. I mean, things are organized here. They give you their cataloging all the stuff. And Bill, you're a real estate guy by background. If the bank owns real estate, it doesn't become yours. Even though I'm technically buying it, they pull the charter. Banks are not allowed to go bankrupt. So it's not technically a purchase that way. But the real estate doesn't belong to me. Separately, now, where they're a tenant, I get to take over those leases. But if they own, like you guys know, the place they owned on Ponce, not too far from ours, right? That's now First National Bank of South Miami. It was Lydian's at the time. And they said, I got X period of time to analyze whether I wanted to buy it. Then I got like a mulligan. Wait another month, figure out if we want to buy it. We didn't want to buy it because we have a better office, we feel, a little further north. So the assets of the company become yours. And what happens, I got to stand up. What happens is, it's probably more than you guys want to know, but if you're a depositor there, nobody loses money in these things, right? Because now you're a depositor of mine. But I get 1 week to change the rates on deposits. Because if your bank is having trouble and you want it to survive, chances are you have to pay higher rates than everybody else so people keep money with you. Now, you might structure it in a $250,000 increment so you have insurance. Back then, the insurance went up to $500,000, by the way. Okay? Been $250,000 until then. And what happens is, on our way back they had 3 offices on the west coast of Florida. Driving back from the west coast of Florida, with the stroke of a pen, I ran off $750 million of deposits. I have been known as a deposit hound, to not use a word that starts with a W, okay? And I am guilty as charged. I'm a deposit guy. But on a drive coming across the Everglades from Naples, we lowered rates and people took $750,000 out. I remember the comment was, unless it wears a skirt or pants, lower their rate. Because you had a bunch of institutional people put money in there because you guys were paying nutsy rates. I didn't want it. Those aren't relationships. That was hot money. I don't need hot money. I'm a solid bank. But that, remember I told you guys they were more than half our size technically? It was because of these deposits. That's the story of buying a bank from the FDIC. And that happens when you make a decent bid and you have a good relationship with your regulators and they allow you to bid. More than you wanted to know, but people on the back said, are you going to talk anything about banking? Okay, I just did.
No, this is awesome. Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I think we maybe have 2 more minutes for question or two from the audience. But I think, a few of the questions that we received early on is, what's going on with this current economic climate, impending recession? What's happening in the banking world? What can you share?
Okay. Well, you got the wrong guy relative to, who would have told you we'd be where we are today, right? And now they talk about the terminal rate being between 6 and 7, the Fed funds terminal rate, which would make the prime 9, más o menos, right? You have an inverted yield curve. You could buy a 10-year treasury and it yields less money to you, plenty less money than a 2-year treasury. Think about that. You invest your money for 10 years and you earn X. You invest the same amount of money for 2 years and you earn more than X. Typically, that signals recession. Okay? We can all debate why not, what happened, is it COVID, is it Biden, did trust start it, is it the Chinese, is it supply chain? Everybody's got an opinion, which is why I'm not going to give you mine, because mine is no more valid than any of yours. You're as likely to be right as mine. We, as Americans, and as business people, as students, we have to deal with it. Okay? How we deal with it is going to define our success or our failures. Folks do believe that we will have a recession, a fairly shallow one, next year. Some people say we're already in it. Again, that's conjecture, and those are debates. I think folks believe that corporate earnings have been pretty good so far, but they're in non-inflation adjusted dollars. So I said numbers lie before, didn't I? Okay. So next year, no one expects corporate earnings to be as strong. I had the benefit last night. I had to go to a function in Ocean Reef, which is like La La Land. We have a beautiful office in Ocean Reef. The only bank that opens full-time in Ocean Reef all year in regular hours. We're great business there. We got lucky when we bought Gibraltar with the Ocean Reef office, right? Huang and Mike, who came to us through Gibraltar almost 5 years ago now. Hard to believe, right? And our economist, a young lady, Sophia Kearney-Lederman, was speaking to clients and prospects there. And so a little bit of the economic information I have, I learned from her. I'm going to meet with her tomorrow. She's speaking at the bank today when I'm here with you guys. And it was a lot of what I just told you is stuff that I gleaned from her talk yesterday. But we do believe that the stock market's going to have a bumpy year next year, potentially bumpier than this year, maybe not as volatile as this year, because we've had a lot of ups and downs, the famous VIX index, right? One of the best quotes, there's 2 quotes that I've really loved. One of them has nothing to do with finance, but I'm going to tell you anyway. Does anybody know what the definition of minor surgery is? Anybody know? When they operate on somebody else. They're operating on you. It's like, oh my God. They operate on somebody else. Oh, I had that in Cuba 3 times. It's a piece of cake. Don't worry about it, right? Okay. The other one is, right? Get greedy when other people are fearful, and be fearful when other people are greedy. That's Warren Buffett's. And I think he's 100% right. You just got to be careful because the market's awfully tough to time. Never believe you're good enough to time the bottom of the market or the top of the market. My wife tells me all the time, oh, it's easy, it's easy. Yeah, right. It's not easy. She's a computer scientist. You can't go by that, okay? It's very hard. And so I think 23 is going to be a little, more than a little bumpy. You're going to have